Hello, y'all, and welcome back to the channel. I am here with a book review. It's been a while since I posted one of those, but I've actually been reading quite a few things. I'm just getting around to posting the book review. Today, I'm going to be talking about a book called One Summer in Savannah by Tara Shelton Harris. You guys know I love my Target book club, so this was another Target book club selection. Um, and this book was definitely one, it was really good. Two, it was something that I wasn't really expecting. It tells you on the back that something happened and you kind of get an idea what it's about. But this was giving me Lifetime movie and one of the good ones. Not to say that Lifetime movies are typically bad, but you know how they can be pretty predictable and it's kind of like how they end. But this is giving Lifetime movie and one that I would definitely love to watch. So Lifetime, if you're watching, y'all might want to check this book out because this is a good one. And it is, and while this is a work of fiction, there have been some similar situations that have occurred, and I know Lifetime did make a movie about that. Um, and so, trigger warning: this book does talk about um, sexual assault and the results of that and basically living with that. So in the book, and I'm not going to give any spoilers here. So if you haven't read the book and you plan to read it, or maybe after you hear me talk about it, you are interested in reading it, I'm not going to give away any spoilers. Whatever I'm talking about is going to be either mentioned here on the back in the summary or just something that it's told in the story that's not going to ruin it for you. It's not going to ruin anything. But the question is, can you ever truly forgive if you can't forget? So essentially, this girl, our main characters are Sarah and Jacob. And as you read through the book, you'll notice that each chapter, for the most part, is either called Sarah or Jacob. And the way the book is written, you are hearing the story through either Sarah's perspective or Sarah will be speaking or telling the story, or you're looking at it from Jacob's perspective. So these are the two main characters in the story. And then we also have Precious Alana, who is Sarah's daughter. And then we also have Daniel, who is Jacob's twin brother. So those are our key people. Birdie is also another kind of key character, and that is the Daniel and Jacob's mother. So it's been 8 years since Sarah Lancaster left her home in Savannah, Georgia. So the One Summer in Savannah is in reference to Savannah, Georgia. Um, in 8 years since her daughter Alana came into the world following a terrifying assault that left deep emotional wounds Sarah would do anything to forget. But when Sarah's father falls ill, she's forced to return home and face the ghosts of her past. So I read that, which is on the back. That's part of the summary. It's a good window into what this is about. So, as you already heard, Sarah had suffered a sexual assault. Alana is a result of that. And so after that occurred, Sarah left the state of Georgia and relocated somewhere else. It's talked about in the book, but she lived somewhere else. But since her father became ill, she came back to her hometown in Savannah to look after him because it's just her and her dad. Her mother passed away when she was young, when she was still a child. And so it's just been her and her dad. So she came back to be with him while he is ill. And also, this is his first time meeting Alana. They have talked via, uh, was it FaceTime and those types of things, but she has never, or her dad has never met her daughter, Alana, his granddaughter, in person. So it also gives a chance for that connection to happen as well. So one of the reasons that Sarah leaves or the main reason Sarah leaves is because of the sexual assault and because of the fact that she became pregnant with Alana as a result of that. And so without getting too far into it, just say that she was afraid that the father of her child would try to take some claim or stake on Alana. And so she didn't want to have to deal with that custody battle. So if you're not aware, and I know you might be thinking, well, he essentially, assaulted her, raped her. How can he have rights? But in most states, the rapist of, that if a child is produced as a product of that, the father would still have parental rights to the child. Unfortunately, right now, it's still that way in a lot of states. There are a couple states that do have some measures in place for that. But in most states, it is still, they still would have rights. So if the dad were to come forward and be like, oh, I have a kid, like I want access to my kid, joint custody, whatever, he would have a right to do so, regardless of the fact of how the child came to be. So that is one of the reasons why Sarah, or the main reason why Sarah fled um, Georgia, because where she moved to has some protection. She would have some protection against that. In Georgia, unfortunately, does not. When I mentioned a Lifetime movie, there is a Lifetime movie about a real life story of a similar situation, and that person did fight for some rights. But I want to say she was in North Carolina, so that's a movie. But this is a work of fiction. But again, like I said, even though it's fictional, there are similar real events that have occurred like this, very similar to this. One thing I do want to note is that the author mentioned that this story was inspired by, we were talking about the theme of forgiveness, and that is all throughout this story in many different ways. There's a lot of forgiveness, not just between Sarah and her having to come to terms with her attacker, but also just in so many different things. There's a lot of healing that has to happen. Due to a bunch of different things throughout the story. And so I do like the way that the story is written, and how we are introduced to all these different dynamics, family dynamics, as well as keeping true to the theme of the initial question, can you ever truly forgive if you can't forget? So it's kind of like, can you forgive the person who raped you because you have this beautiful little girl that came from it, even though it wasn't a traumatic way? This is one of the best things that ever happened to you in terms of the fact that you have this little girl. Can you forgive your family members if you were the uh, relative of someone who committed such a heinous act? Could you forgive them? Can you forgive if your family member maybe didn't take your side in such a situation? So all these types of dynamics are occurring, and how that impacts everybody. Uh, Sarah as the victim of that trauma, as well as the person who did it, how both families are impacted by these two people and their choices. The other thing is, Jacob's last name is Weiler, and again, they're in the South. The families, Jacob and his twin, his brother Daniel, their last name is Weiler. They are like a very prominent family in the South. If you are from the South, you understand how this goes. A lot of times when people come home to the South, or if you are, dating someone or whatever, somebody, an older person might ask you like, who are your people? And what they're asking is like last names. Last names carry weight in the South because a lot of times families have been established in certain cities, or neighborhood, not neighborhoods, but cities, or areas of the South, and they have a history, and they have, kind of like a legacy to those communities. And so the Wilders are one of those people where they're a wealthy family. And the interesting piece about them is they're also a mixed couple. And so you have the mom who is black, and you have the dad who is white, who was the one who came from the wealthy family, and he meets this black woman, and he ends up, marrying her and whatnot. And so they were a whole thing because of the timing, and it's in the South. And even today in modern day times, while people may not speak up as much about it, they're still feeling sometimes when, especially in smaller cities, or if you're in a prominent white Southern family, they bring home a black person. It's like, yeah, so it's still kind of like that, even in today's society, or in today's times when it comes to that with the mixed couples. But they kind of did something that was out of the box. A lot of tragedy and tragic things happen to this family over time, and we see those things unfold, and we see how it has impacted each individual person, and how it was kind of a domino effect in the tragedies. So that's where the Wilders come in. And again, Jacob is a Wilder. And then we have Sarah and her family again. Her mom was killed. I want to say her mom was killed in a car accident, I believe. And so the impact that this had, one, of course, she lost her mom, but also her dad stopped talking normal. And when I say normal, I mean in terms of, like I'm talking to you. He only spoke in poems because he was a professor, and so he was very into poetry. So whenever he spoke to you in by using a poem, and you would kind of have to decipher that. Like that would be the answer to his. If you ask him a question, that would be his response. Would be a poem, or if he was just giving his thoughts, it would be in the form of a poem, and you would have to kind of decipher that. And one, it would cause you to have to kind of analyze the poem to understand what exactly he's trying to communicate to you. So I thought that was a very interesting piece as well, having the father only be able to communicate that way. So he wouldn't just come out and answer you in a direct question. He would always give you that response in the form of a poem. Which for Sarah is also something that she grew up with, and she speaks about the fact that that was, although she knew that he loved her as a father, he showed it. She felt it. She didn't feel unloved, but sometimes she just wanted to hear him say, I love you. And he didn't say that. He would say it with a poem, so those are the types of things that she dealt with and still kind of deals with as well. The one thing that I was going to mention is at the beginning, the author gives like a little backstory, and she talks about how this book is somewhat inspired, or the concept of forgiving when something kind of horrific has been done, where it's seemingly unforgivable essentially has happened or occurred. How do you find a way to forgive, or could you, forgive? And she mentions the situation that happened down in Charleston a few years ago, where it was a young white boy, teenager, high school age student. He had gone into a black church. They were having, I think it was like Bible study, and he had worship with them. They had welcomed him, and this was in Charleston, South Carolina. They had welcomed him in. He had worship with them, everything, and he turned around and basically massacred them and took a lot of lives. And it was very shocking to both that community as well as to people who knew the person, the child, um, because they were saying that, and he had black and white friends, and they were saying he never gave off any kind of signs or anything saying that he was like racist, or that he would even do anything like that. Like that was so, they were very shocked. Like everybody was very shocked on all different levels. But one of the things that came about at his trial is that the family members of the loved ones who had either been victims and passed away, or injured, or just were there when it happened, they said that they forgave him for that. And so the author was saying that she was inspired because you would think, how do you forgive somebody for doing that? And so that's kind of where this book comes when you think about the things that have happened, like Sarah's situation. Could you ever forgive the person that, sexually assaulted you, or, did something like that to you? How could you do that? Where do you find that? Especially with the fact that you have a child. So you have a constant reminder, even though a very, positive constant reminder, you still have a constant reminder of something horrible that happened to you. I want to say that this is also the author's first novel. Now, she is a freelance writer, so it's not like she's never written anything just decided to write a book. She does write little pieces of fiction, and again, she's a freelance writer, but this is her first novel, and for it to be a first novel, she did that. This is wonderful. This, like I said, Lifetime, check this out, make this movie, because this is actually a really good story. It started off, I wasn't quite sure where it was going, but the more that I read it, I got into it, and I really truly enjoyed this story. One of the other things I love about it is that at the end you have a little interview with the author, so that you can kind of see where her head was when it comes to um writing this book, like why she wrote it, why she made the characters the way they are. She does speak about why she made the father communicate in that method, being someone who not only communicate via poetry versus, just speaking like everybody else. So I love when people do those little interviews and things at the end, so that you can really get a good perspective on the book, and what the author is thinking and what they intended for us to get from it. So definitely recommend One Summer in Savannah. If you have not already read it, please pick it up. Again, it's a Target Book Club book, so you can find it in, of course, Target. So it's also sold other places, but it is definitely worth a read. So let me know if you guys have read One Summer in Savannah. Let me know your thoughts, or if maybe you're now considering picking it up. Thank you so much for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you next time.